So in this video, I'm going to share with you the tools, the perspective shifts, the mindsets that have helped me overcome procrastination and perfectionism and imposter syndrome, especially when I was first starting out as a creative freelancer. And then time and time again, and even now as I continuously evolve, and hopefully so will you, you will constantly come against this again and again. And so it's really useful to have these frameworks or to have these tools of awareness to catch yourself when you're in it, and how to show yourself some compassion and understanding how to really guide yourself through these phases. Nishka's getting a bit restless, so we're gonna go for a little hike and talk at the same time. So number one, I feel like it all ties back down these three issues that we have all kind of come back to this core fear of what people think of us, right? And how they're going to perceive us, judge us, criticize us. And it also comes back to stems from this feeling of like not enoughness. And because if you were enough, then you wouldn't really care what people think of you, right? You would just be so rooted, so grounded in your sense of self-worth, in your work itself. And oftentimes it's really a reflection of how much more inner work we still have to do in terms of self-worth. And I really think that the biggest difference between entrepreneurs who you see as successful and who you admire compared to perhaps yourself, and those who are still starting out and struggling in some aspect to grow, is often it comes down to this labeling of this is bad, this is good. If you are thinking that you're not good enough, then that means, or if you feel like your work isn't good enough, or if you feel like this procrastination is bad, you feel like you are a fraud, that you don't deserve to be here in this room, or you don't deserve to be making money from your gifts, then and you believe that, then you are in a way believing your feelings. And what I've learned over the past years being in business is that your feelings aren't your reality. Your feelings come and go. They are not your reality. Your actions are your reality. So you can feel one way and yet still act another. And this was a massive breakthrough for me, and I actually heard this quote originally from Leila Hormozi, and it blew my mind because I was like, oh, you mean that I have the power to still decide differently? You know, you can feel one way and choose not to act in accordance with that feeling. And it so massively freed me, because I used to feel, as a creative, I used to feel so trapped in my feelings. If I feel this way, then I have to do what I feel, because this is what feels most alive for me right now. And that is actually an aspect that really helps us in creative work. But it also really hinders us when it comes to making progress in business, for example, right? And so dealing with this is often what we resort to, actually, in our way of dealing with this, in the way that we know how, in the way that we've been brought up to know how, is by shaming ourselves, by bashing ourselves and being mean to ourselves and saying things like, oh, this is why you're not good enough, see, you're lazy, you're useless, you're stupid, you're good for nothing, I don't know, all these negative thoughts that come to mind. And we label these feelings as real, and also as like something shameful, something to be shameful of. And instead of extending ourselves compassion, right? And understanding and trying to really dive deeper is like, where did this thought come from? Like, why am I procrastinating in the first place? Like, what am I actually afraid of, right? Because procrastination, as well, for me at least, and it may be different for you, I can only speak from experience here. Procrastination for me was in a way to avoid the possibility of failing my own high standards. If I start something, for example, if I start a website or I start writing a newsletter blog, for example, then I am technically entering the game, right? Where I have set myself a particular standard for this particular style of work, and if I don't meet it, then I feel like I failed myself. And so what I've actually had to learn to do, what's really helped me, is to not tie the success with the perceived high standard of perfectionism of that work, but rather tie in the success or the success metric with the action of just doing. And if I just open up the page and I start writing and I actually post or send or schedule, for example, a blog post or a newsletter, then that is success. And all I need to do is that. And it really takes the pressure off, because when you don't have that pressure, you actually feel more safe in your nervous system to do the thing, because you don't feel like you don't have this fear of judgment from yourself and also judgment from others as well. But I think ultimately our fear of judgment from others actually comes from the fear of judgment of ourselves. So whereas perfectionism, I find, is more rooted in how you were praised when you were a child. And for example, I'm someone who's always prided myself on being perfect, or perfectionism. I always, when I started my business, I was like, I'm a perfectionism, and I said that and I stated it as something to be really, really proud of. And it is and it isn't. I think perfectionism and having high standards are two very different things, right? Perfectionism is about you and your ego and how you feel gratified. Your ego feels gratified when something is to your perfection, but perfection also doesn't exist, right? And so in a way, perfectionism is actually getting work to a stage where other people praise you and your ego, right? You're in a way actually doing it for external validation rather than internal. And this really comes from your childhood. Well, I think it comes from your childhood. I'm not a therapist, so I can only speak from experience. For me, it came from my childhood. I was always praised for getting A grades, perfect scores, everything. And if I didn't, I got punished pretty heavily. And I was taught that anything subpar, anything below perfect, wasn't safe. And that I wasn't able to be loved, or I wasn't loved unless I was perfect, unless I strove for that. And so my sense of self-worth and my sense of self-love came from doing things perfectly for other people, for external validation. And that was definitely a lot to unravel. And which is why, honestly, I think doing this kind of internal work and having this awareness is so vital, because so many of our blocks in business, so many of our blocks in creativity and in life, relationships as well, actually comes from early childhood and patterns and behaviors and things that we learned to believe in, stories which aren't necessarily true. And yeah, we just need to spend some time, have some white space to unravel them. So the other side of perfectionism then, like having high standards, that is not about you, because that you have a level of mastery in your craft and you know that this is of quality standard. And so something can be high standard but not perfect to, in your sense of perfectionism, right? And so you need to kind of discern at what point is it of high quality and it is actually ready to be shipped, and that there is no perfection, right? And that getting things done, getting things out there, and by doing more of it rather than perfecting the minute details is actually how you're going to get better. It's actually how you're going to make a difference and to make an impact and to help more people, right? And number 3, imposter syndrome. So I think imposter syndrome is a really interesting one because it's also implies that you are expanding, you are evolving into being a person that you have never been before. So in a way, it's a good thing to feel imposter syndrome, because if you're not feeling imposter syndrome, then you're not growing, you're not changing, you're not evolving, right? However, it can be so debilitating when you believe that because you feel like a fraud, because you feel like an imposter syndrome, because you haven't been this person that you've never been before, that you cannot do the actions associated with what's needed to become that person. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle. And I think the biggest difference between entrepreneurs who I see are thriving and really successful and those who are still starting out and really struggling is the sense of like feeling one way and acting another. Like, I still feel imposter syndrome. A lot of my friends who are like really 7-8 figure businesses are also feeling imposter syndrome in a way. They're always changing, they're always evolving, they're always trying new things. And whenever you're trying new things, experimenting, there's always this sense of self-doubt or like, oh, who am I? Like, am I really this person? And I also think that ultimately, when it comes to imposter syndrome, what helps me and might help you is to just be radically honest with yourself. Like, if you say you are, I don't know, a freelancer, but you are still employed in a 9-to-5 and you actually don't have any clients and you haven't taken any of the actions associated with being a freelancer, then technically you're not, and that's why you feel like an imposter, because you're not doing the actions associated with the person or the identity that you actually want to be. And consequently, like, say you want to be a photographer, but like, you bought a camera but you don't actually go out, you don't take photos, you don't share your photos, then of course you feel like an imposter when people ask, oh, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a photographer, sort of. Right. And another example could be like, for example, in my case, when I first started getting into web design, and it was a new label for me. I'd always told people I was a freelance photographer, I was a travel blogger, all these things. And then it felt really weird suddenly to be like, I'm a freelance web designer now. And at that point, it actually took me about 6 months from when I launched my website and decided this, officially this is what I'm doing. It took me 6 months before I got my first official client. And in that time, that limbo, I felt massive imposter syndrome. I was like, who am I? I was like, are we kidding ourselves? Like, did we just, like, are we shooting for the moon? And it's like, this isn't going to work out. And I had so much self-doubt. And I was like, I'm not a web designer. I'm just pretending to be one. I'm a fraud. Even though I have built websites. So that's the funny thing, is like, I have built websites. I just didn't have clients coming in necessarily, like paying me yet a lot to do the thing. But it was kind of untrue at the same time. And so sometimes your thoughts aren't always true. So there's two aspects to us. One, recognizing that some of your thoughts aren't actually true. The fact that I'm a fraud, I've never built websites before, it's like, is that true? And then it's like, is that absolutely true? This thought of yours. And oftentimes it's like, it's a no, because you have done something to get to where you are right now. So the second aspect to that is, what could you say to yourself that is more true, that is more radically honest and true, to actually take the pressure off you? Because again, imposter syndrome comes from like when people ask us, oh, what do you do? And you're like, I'm kind of web design. I'm a web designer, but you don't feel like you are, and you say it not confidently because you it's some way it feels incongruent with your sense of identity. It feels just misaligned. It's not fully there yet. And so what you could say that feels more true is tweak it a little bit. Just be more honest. Say, I'm currently learning to be a web designer, or I'm currently looking for my first web design clients. Or I'm starting out in web design. I just started my business and I'm looking for my first clients, right? And you can say that with such conviction because it's true. And I think oftentimes when it comes to imposter syndrome, it's like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a CEO, I'm whatever. It's like, but you don't fully, it's not fully congruent with your definition of that label, right? And also like labels in general, who cares? But yeah, something that's helped me definitely is just being more honest. Like, how can I tweak it so that it feels more congruent with where I am right now? And you'll find that it really takes the pressure off you because you are no longer scared that people are going to find out that you're not actually a web designer, you have no clients. It's like, I said I don't have any clients. I said I'm just starting out. I said that I'm still looking for my first clients. And that is so honest, it is so true. And people would be like cheering you on because like, I think a lot of the fear is like, oh my God, like you're not then really a web designer. It's like, well, no, actually most people would be surprisingly supportive, hopefully. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I know somebody who is looking for a website. Maybe you can help her out, etc. And just being radically honest and being in your truth, you'd be surprised how it moves other people and inspires other people, and how much support you actually rally up from your friends and from your family when you are in your truth. So that wraps up my thoughts on procrastination, perfectionism, and imposter syndrome. If you have any questions, or if you're working through one of these at the moment and you're just like really hitting a block, or something that I said you kind of disagree with or want to add on, comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to carry on this conversation. If you like this video and you want more kind of casual style hiking, walking, talking in nature, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Hey, Mishi. This girl just knows how to enjoy life. Hey? Oh, Mishi.